Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Your Favorite Movies. This is episode 17, and today I am joined by Ethan Butler. Ethan, how are you doing today?
I am doing all right, yeah.
That's pretty good. And what movie are we talking about today?
We're talking about Before Sunset, directed by Richard Linklater. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, I got the Criterion set. This is a film that I really adore. This whole trilogy is one of my all-time favorites. And or what is his name? Ethan Hawke. There we go. Is one of my favorite actors of all time, and one of the main reasons that he became one of my favorites was because of films like this. But do you remember the first time you saw the film?
This film, yeah, it was April 2020, and it was toward the beginning of the pandemic. And I heard about them. Like, I knew kind of a basic idea of what they were about, just kind of like conversations. And they all came out 10 years apart, and they were directed by Richard Linklater, and Ethan Hawke was in them. That was about it. I didn't really know much about the plot or the characters or what they even talk about. Like, I hadn't heard any like quotes or watched any scenes from it before. So basically, I was just really curious to see what they were. And I heard, some people call them favorites, but they weren't that talked about for the most part. So I wanted to get like a basic idea. And so I sat down, I watched all three of them in one night.
Oh, wow.
So it was started at probably like midnight or one in the morning, and just watched all three. I didn't sleep because I just wanted to. I was gonna try the first one, see how I felt, and I was like, all right, I'm into this. And then I watched the second one and watched the third one, and kind of my initial thoughts on all three of them were kind of the first one. I had no idea that conversation in film could be this interesting. I didn't realize that there could be such an authenticity to movie romances, because I hadn't seen like a film romance that kind of felt this real and authentic and alive. For the most part, they're just, they cast two attractive people to just kind of
Yeah,
read off of a movie script.
besides his
That's
haircut in this film.
yeah. First one I liked a lot. I love it now. I think that the first one's a perfect film. And I think the second one's even better. But kind of with the first one, the first time I saw it, I there were some parts I couldn't really take that seriously because I just didn't understand kind of like, I guess, where they were coming from, because I just couldn't comprehend the concept of like two people falling in love in the span of a night, and like being this open with each other like that easily. But the more I've watched it, the more believable it has become, and I've really bought into it a lot more. But at first, like, it was kind of hard for me to adjust to that idea. But now, like, thinking back at conversations I've had with people that I've met, like, I met them for the first time like in the morning, and then throughout the whole day I spent talking to them. Like, I realized I
Yeah.
actually do open up a lot, and it's a very normal thing. It's just the first time I saw I couldn't get into that. So that kind of lowered my score a little bit, but over time it's gotten up to like my top 30 of all time. So
Good.
and then the second one, I was just kind of like entranced by it. I mean, this is my favorite film for a reason, but just like, it was just one of those experiences where you're sitting down and you're just so focused and you're so into it, and you just forget you're watching a movie. And it was kind of first one of the few times that's happened to me where I'm like just fully invested in every single thing going on, every little line of dialogue. So it just immediately got that 10 out of 10 score from me. But over time, it's had more of an emotional resonance with me. At first, it was just, I'm so engaged in this. And then the more I rewatch it, because this movie's surprisingly rewatchable, the more I rewatch it,
Yeah.
you just kind of, you can understand a lot more of where these characters are coming from. Certain conversations really stick out to you. Because with these films, overall, in this one specifically, I feel like it's not just two people talking. Like, there's some films where people just walk around, they talk about nothing, and it's cool, it's interesting, but there's just something special about what they actually talk about and the things you can like just something that I noticed when I watched this film recently for like the fourth or fifth time. It was kind of even though it's 80 minutes long, it's like really short, and it's just two people talking. And from the outside, from the surface, it seems like it's not that special. A lot of people consider um some of their films to be favorites. How do I say this? Basically, the more the better, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
some people are like, like Lord of the Rings or Avengers Endgame or something. Like those are great movies. I'm just saying that a lot of people say, more characters, more action, more this, more that, the more you stuff into it, the more satisfaction you can get out of that. And in a lot of ways, it does work. Like the ones I mentioned, it works very
Yeah.
well. But something that's just so different and odd about these is you get a lot of satisfaction from what they talk about because they can kind of go off on a tangent and talk about a story or something that they learned in their past or an experience they had. And you basically get like an entire it like branches off into an entire different movie you play in your head. Like you just
Yeah.
kind of imagine these things that they're saying. The one story where Celine's talking about being in America and there's like a cop that came to, do you remember that part?
Yeah.
And she's talking about how, he's like, you need to own a gun, but that whole story feels like just in my head what I imagine from it because how descriptive the dialogue is and how it utilizes your senses very well. You kind of just experience like a 30-minute episode of a TV show basically in that span. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it branches off into a bunch of different stories and ideas. And to me that's so weird because like it's just it's two people walking around a city and talking. That's all it should like from the outside, that's all it really is. But you can pick up and gather so many things from that and experience a lot of different things using your imagination from what they're talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. On multiple watches, I've kind of realized that I'm so surprised that this film is as rewatchable as it is, for having so many conversations and ideas that connect with me. And there's some things that I just miss on first watch that they're talking about, or something that at that particular time that I'm watching it, it connects with me more. And so there's always something in there to gain to feel connected to. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
over time, that's kind of what it's turned into for me, and it's one I love to revisit. It's a very emotional experience. It's very sweet. It's also kind of sad. It's got a lot of things going on. So also on my first watch, what was it? After I finished this one, I was like, oh man, that was so perfect. But then I watched Before Midnight, and I didn't love it, to be honest. It was an experience that was kind of hard to stomach, especially since the first two were so likable and easy to identify with. The third one is a little more like edgy. It's a little more, you know, it's hard cut, so you're just really you have to ease into it a little more. So
Yeah.
on multiple rewatches, I've come to love that film even more. It's now one of my favorites. It just took me a while to really fully appreciate it. So it was kind of a disappointment to leave off on my least favorite of the trilogy that night. And so, but I wanted to rewatch them again, and I kept rewatching them. Every time I watch Before Sunset, it's when I'm watching it all together with the other two films
Yes.
because I
Yeah.
feel
You
like
don't
they're,
watch it by itself.
yeah, yeah, but still on its own, it's a really, really unique and human experience that you just don't find in film anymore. It's really hard to find films that are just that honest and open.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Like this film, as we were kind of saying before, like minutes ago, it goes with the less is more technique. I feel like, yeah, like, the movie is basically just two people talking. That's how the first one is. The third one has a little bit more. There's more characters and more dialogue. And just to kind of run through the trilogy for me, the first one is my favorite one. It's one of my favorite films of all time. My second favorite romance film ever. That film means so much to me. Like it's, I mean, the whole trilogy, but especially that one, I'm just so passionate about it. And it inspires me so much. Like every time I've seen it now twice, I think, yeah, two or three, no, twice, and I've gone back and watched certain scenes from it. It's just one of the few perfect movies in my opinion. This one, when I
Mhm.
first watched it, I didn't love it as much as the other ones, but I did still love it. I give it like a 4.5 out of 5, but because I just had finished one of the greatest movies I had ever seen the night before, I was like, okay. And I knew just one part from the film. I saw it on Instagram. It was when one of the where are they in this film? I can't remember exactly. In Paris, and the one
Mhm.
thing like had been like crashed down or whatever a few years ago, like in real life. And I remember they're looking at it in the film, so I saw that post, but I knew nothing going into the film. And then when I rewatched this film, that's when I really adored it, and it actually jumped above Before Midnight for me. Again, Sunrise will always be my favorite. And Midnight for me, I don't know why it took me like a few weeks to watch it, but when I watched it, I was just like blown away. I think that that film actually has their best performances out of the whole
Oh yeah.
trilogy because
Oh yeah.
for those who have seen the film, the ending is pretty intense and very emotional. I mean, they all are, but that one I actually love more than this one. But now my ranking goes one, two, three, but they're all 5 out of 5 films, all in my 100 favorite movies. And
Mhm.
this one is really special because it has not only what I think is the best ending out of the whole trilogy with the guitar and like, oh baby, you're gonna miss that plane. It's just like, oh, that thing's just utterly perfect. But the more I watch
Mhm.
this film, and I watch so many videos kind of discussing the themes, and the main theme of this one too, but especially the first one, is time. And that I kind of wrote like a more professional letterbox review when I originally watched it, and I kind of watched it around the same time as you. It was either like April or May of 2020, like in lockdown and everything, and I still remember seeing it for the first time. And a quick little funny ish tidbit about this is that when I first watched it, I was in a relationship with someone who reminds me so much of Celine because she's not like, I'm Canadian. She's not Canadian. She has an accent. I won't say where she's from, but it's overseas, and she has blonde hair, and she like, so I was just like, this is weird seeing and
Mhm.
everything. But then, like, I don't know, that's just a funny little tidbit. But for this film, I mean, the dialogue, it has one of the greatest scripts of all time, and I love these films
Mhm.
so much that I do have this criterion set. I only have three criterions, which is this one, The Princess Bride, and 12 Angry Men. This one is, yeah, it's my favorite one out of them just because I love the special features it's loaded with. And I haven't watched them yet on Criterion, but I did watch them on Crave, which is what we have here in Canada, and then Before Midnight's on Amazon Prime Video. And I just like, I watched scenes from here and some of the behind the scenes things, but this film and all three of them are, they're just something else. They're on a whole other level, I think.
Yeah, especially Before Sunset, and I think that's a lot of it is just how I think just its simplicity. I think it thrives in its simplicity,
Yeah.
whereas the first one feels like an adventure really. You're along for the journey, and it feels kind of epic, and the third one feels just really emotional and draining, and Before Sunset just feels like two people talking and reminiscing about things that have happened to them in their past. And to me, I just think that's where the trilogy really shines is here, because this is the bridge between those two things. Because when they're young and single, they have this excitement about life, and they don't really know where their paths are going to go. And Before Sunset is and then sorry, Before Midnight is where you see where they're at, and you see what's happened to them, what's become of them. But kind of seeing that middle ground where they're making those decisions and seeing what they want to do with their life is just, it's like really investing. It's really exciting, and you want to see them together, but at the same time, you know it shouldn't happen,
Yeah.
like morally. But it's just like it's complicated. Like there's a complexity to their internal struggles, but what's going on outside is like very simple. So it's like this weird mix of it's like relaxing to watch, but at the same time, it makes you think
Your brain is just
a
going and
lot.
going and going and going because, like, as you said, you want them to
Hmm.
be together because in the first film they seem perfect for each other. They're like totally in love and everything. But in this one, you can kind of tell something is different, like something is a little off. And I think that's what adds to like the intrigue. That's obviously not a fault with the movie. This is easily like a 5 out of 5 film. I think they all are. And I think that's what makes this film really special. As you said, it's like the bridge, obviously, you have the first one, second one, and third one. And it's just kind of like a full-on arc, and I think that's really interesting because you have them catch up, and we now see where they are in life. And, Jesse, yes, that's his name. Jesse has published a book about that night, and Celine is like kind of upset, kind of all this. And you see that, but the whole time you can kind of tell they do still have feelings for each other. They do still want to be together. But the question is, should they? And I think that's what makes the film so interesting and actually really complex when you really dive into the themes, the meaning. If you really were to study every single line of dialogue, it's really special. One of my favorite things here is it's just something that will always stick in my mind, where
Hmm.
when he says like it feels like if someone were to touch me, I just dissolve into like a million particles or something. And then she hugs him and he's like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm seeing if you're still here. And it's just like there's little tidbits like that, which again, it's not like oh no, I don't know how people miss this. Like it's obvious, but it's just really special. And Richard Linklater is one of my favorite directors now, just because of these films and School of Rock, which is my one of my favorite comedies of all time. Boyhood is great as well. I really need to rewatch that one. But yeah, this film is just on another level. Like I genuinely don't know how it's made. I'm glad they had more of a budget for this one compared to the first one. And in certain scenes, you could feel it, I think. And that's not a good, or that's not something that makes it better or worse than the first, if that makes sense. But it's just a phenomenal film, and if you haven't seen it, you need to watch all of them.
For sure. There's a lot of interesting ideas too. Just kind of one about kind of the dangers of holding on to
Yes.
your memories. How he's kind of obsessed with this one night from his 20s, and he wants to relive that night over and over again. That's just he wrote a book about it. He can't stop thinking about it. It kind of dives into that a little bit. Just kind of there's that point where they're in the limo, um, and he's describing that dream that he has. I'm not going to go
Yeah.
into detail here, but just like the how visibly uncomfortable she was hearing that, but also just like it makes you think you're like, wow, like there's it was like very romantic, and then there's like that point where it just like it gets really stripped down, super honest, and you're like,
Yes.
oh wow, like it kind of hits you in the feels there because you're realizing that these are both very flawed people and they both
Yes.
make mistakes, and I think one of his biggest flaws is kind of having that not having the ability to let go, because from the outside, from as viewers, we're like, oh well, like that's good that we know that they're supposed to be together, and
Yeah.
to us we're rooting for them to be together, but at the same time, if you think about it from his perspective and from like a moral perspective, it shouldn't really happen. And
I
him
agree.
kind of having that sort of obsession about reliving those days and being with this girl that he only knew for one night and not living his own life,
Yes.
not living in the moment, like he said earlier in the film. Just things like that, I feel kind of add another layer to the movie because you have the romantic aspects that we all love, but we also have things like this where it makes you question, is this even right? And I love it for that. Like every time I see it, like I always feel like the answer is different. You know what I mean? Like there's just so
Yeah.
much to unpack. It's like one of the most simple, straightforward movies, really. It's
Yeah,
just
on
it's
the
two people
surface,
talking
I
on the
agree. On the
surface.
surface, it seems like a simple film, but when you really dive into it and focus on the characters, it's really something else. I think Richard Linklater just continues to do stuff like with these films. It just adds more layers to them. Still, the first one is my favorite, but there's so much when we could easily dive into the characters and talk about them for hours. And when you talk about like the attachment issues, that's something that even like I've struggled with in real life. And when I look back at these conversations, I just think like I've had ones that are exactly like this. These people are a lot older than me, but the conversations just feel so real and genuine. Like I don't feel like I'm watching Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy like on screen. I feel like I'm watching Jesse and Celine, and I feel like that's the biggest compliment you could ever give a director or a screenwriter, like anything like that, or an actor even, is when you see people on screen and not characters. I think that's what really makes it something else. I think that the performances here are just top notch. Characters, writing, direction, everything, even like the simplistic cinematography. If it was like these big grand shots, it like swoops down and focuses on them, like that would be so stupid of them. But they don't do that. They just keep it simple, but it is like it's really complex in a way. And Ethan, I have to thank you for coming on. It was a lot of fun talking about this film again. Before Sunset and the entire trilogy, the Before trilogy is probably my top three, top five trilogies of all time. And this film is an all time favorite for me as well. And go subscribe to Ethan, follow him and everything. All of his links will be down below. And is there anything else you want to say about the film?
Well, I guess just watch it, and I think if you feel like conversations you have with other people in your own life are like how do I say it? Like, I guess, unnatural. Um, if you watch this, if you watch this movie and see how the conversation plays out, you'll realize you're not alone. That's just kind of how
Yeah.
normal conversations go, and it's really weird that it took a movie for me to kind of realize that.
Yeah.
um,
I get that
but
for sure.
yeah, but man, yeah, it's a great film, and I'm I'm just like a kid, you know. So just thinking about how that would affect me in my adult years is just it's crazy to me that I'm connecting with this film about adults this young. Um, but throughout the years, I feel like it's going to be one that I can stick with. I don't feel like I'll outgrow it anytime soon.
Oh yeah, I definitely won't. It's definitely one of my comfort films. It's just this one, and again, all the films in the trilogy really comfort films. If you haven't seen them, you need to check them out. I also highly recommend buying the Criterion if you want to spend that much money. I got it on a sale, so that was nice. And thank you all for watching. Join us next week for episode 18, I think. See you guys next time. Over and out.